du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe.
Not every military leader is remembered for glory. Some are remembered for how badly they failed. From ancient Rome to modern wars, history is full of generals whose decisions led to chaos, defeat, and sometimes total disaster. But today, we're going to take a look at some renowned generals remembered for their woeful decisions which led to their downfall. First up, Quintis Cervilius Sapio. It was 105 BC. Rome was facing a major threat from the Cimbri, a Germanic tribe pushing into Roman territory. Sapio was supposed to join forces with another Roman general, Gnaeus Malleus Maximus. But Sapio didn't like Maximus. He looked down on him, saw him as a man of lower class, not fit to be his commander. So instead of uniting their forces, Sapio set up his camp separately and refused to cooperate. While Maximus was trying to negotiate peace with the Cimbri, Sapio decided to act alone. Without warning or support, he launched a solo attack on the enemy. It was a disaster. The Cimbri crushed his army, then turned on Maximus and wiped out his forces too. In one day, Rome lost around 120,000 men. It was one of the worst defeats in Roman history. And Sapio, well, he survived, but he wasn't celebrated. He was stripped of citizenship, exiled, and blamed for the defeat. There was also a mysterious scandal. A massive shipment of gold, some say 15,000 talents, went missing under his watch. People whisper that Sapio may have been a terrible general, but a pretty successful thief. Next up, Gideon Pillow. Before the Civil War, Pillow had already shown signs of his incompetence. During the Mexican-American War, he made questionable decisions, like ordering his men to dig trenches on the wrong side of a fort. He even tried to steal a Mexican cannon and smuggle it home in his luggage. But thanks to political connections, he escaped punishment. Fast forward to the Civil War. Pillow was a Confederate general and faced Ulyssesgrant in his first major battle, in Belmont. Pillow managed to lose slightly more men than Grant, which in hindsight was the high point of his career. But his biggest failure came at Fort Donelson, a critical Confederate stronghold. When Union troops surrounded the fort, Pillow briefly managed to push them back. It was a golden opportunity to escape or even turn the tide of battle. But instead of pressing the advantage, Pillow ordered his troops to fall back into the fort. That night, he quietly slipped away, leaving his fellow commanders to surrender 15,000 Confederate soldiers. It was a devastating loss, and it opened the South to Union advances. While Grant's star rose, Pillow's reputation was sealed. He had failed not just once, but spectacularly, proving that poor leadership can lose battles, even when victory is within reach. The next we have on the list is Solano Lopez. Lopez had inherited power from his father, who had worked hard to modernize Paraguay and build a capable military. But Lopez had bigger and dangerous dreams. In 1864, he started a war with Brazil. Then, when Argentina denied him passage through their territory, he declared war on them too. Uruguay joined the other two countries, forming the Triple Alliance. It was a 3-against-1 scenario, and Paraguay never had a chance. Lopez's decision led to the bloodiest war in South American history. His country was devastated. Entire towns were destroyed. Almost 90% of Paraguay's fighting-age men died. That's not an exaggeration, it was near total annihilation. As the war dragged on, Lopez became paranoid and cruel. He executed hundreds of his own citizens, even members of his own family. He fought to the bitter end, dying in battle in 1870. His war left Paraguay in ruins for generations, a tragic example of how blind ambition can lead an entire nation to the edge of extinction. Coming up next, we have Douglas Haig. Haig led British forces on the Western Front during World War I. He believed that victory would come through endurance, by grinding the enemy down, even if it meant massive losses. But this belief came at a terrible cost. On July 1, 1916, Haig ordered a massive assault at the Somme. It was one of the bloodiest days in British history. Around 60,000 men were killed or wounded on just the first day. 20,000 of them died before lunch. Did Haig change tactics? No. He kept pushing the same strategy. Wave after wave of soldiers went over the top, straight into machine gun fire. Months later, at Passchendaele, another 275,000 were lost. The battlefield became a swamp of blood and mud. Soldiers called it hell on earth. After the war, Haig was praised by some for helping win the war. But for the men who fought under him, he earned a darker nickname, the Butcher of the Somme. Today, many remember the soldiers as lions, led by donkeys. The next on the list is Erich Ludendorff. Early in World War I, Ludendorff helped defeat Russia at the Battle of Tannenberg. It was a crushing blow, but the larger war strategy, that's where he failed. Germany's original war plan had been changed, weakening their Western Front. Instead of quickly defeating France, the war dragged on. Trench warfare set in. Years of stalemate followed. And when the U.S. finally entered the war, thanks to Ludendorff's push for unrestricted submarine attacks, Germany's fate was sealed. He tried one last push, the spring offensives of 1918, in which they won ground. But Ludendorff had no plan beyond that. He didn't know what to do with his victories, and when Allied forces counterattacked, Germany couldn't hold out. But Ludendorff didn't stop there. After the war, he blamed Germany's loss on betrayal, not strategy. He pushed the stab-in-the-back myth, saying the army had been undefeated, but politicians had sold them out. That lie helped fuel the rise of Adolf Hitler. Ludendorff even marched beside him during the failed beer hall putsch. He never accepted blame, and long after the trenches fell silent, his ideas helped start another, even deadlier war. Moving on to one of the most frustrating figures of the American Civil War, George McCullen. George McCullen was everything a general was supposed to be, on paper. He graduated second in his class at West Point, understood logistics, and could organize a massive army like no one else. His soldiers adored him. He kept them well-fed, well-trained, and well-rested. But there was one major problem. He wouldn't fight. McClellan constantly believed the enemy had more troops than they actually did. He was so cautious, so hesitant, that he let opportunity after opportunity slip through his fingers. While he meticulously planned and prepared, Confederate armies regrouped, retreated, and eventually resisted. In 1862, President Lincoln begged him to move on Richmond. McClellan finally launched the Peninsula Campaign, bringing over 100,000 Union troops by sea. But once again, he stalled, intimidated by what turned out to be a much smaller Confederate force. He sat outside the city for weeks, giving the South time to bring in reinforcements. When he finally advanced, the Confederate General Robert E. Lee pushed him back during the 7 days battles. McClellan had come within earshot of church bells in Richmond and still failed to take the city. Later, After a humiliating Union loss at the Second Battle of Bull Run, Lincoln gave him another chance. McClellan reorganized the army, raised morale, and had a shot at ending the war at Antietam. He even got lucky. Union scouts found Lee's battle plans wrapped around a cigar. But even with that edge, McClellan hesitated. He didn't commit his full force, and the result? A draw, and another missed chance to deal a fatal blow. Lincoln eventually removed him for good. McClellan went on to run for president against Lincoln in 1864 on a platform that basically said, "Let's stop fighting." He lost in a landslide. Now we shift from the battlefield to the open seas. Pierre de Villanuv, who was a French admiral during the Napoleonic Wars, in 1805, he was given a critical mission: lure the British Navy to the Caribbean, then race back to Europe and help Napoleon take control of the English Channel. It was a clever strategy, but Villeneuve panicked. Instead of returning to the Channel, he sailed to Cadiz, Spain. That delay gave Admiral Horatio Nelson time to catch up, and when he did, it was a massacre. The Battle of Trafalgar was one of the most one-sided naval defeats in history. The British lost 0 ships. Villeneuve lost 20. Napoleon's dream of invading Britain was over. Britain would rule the seas for the next 100 years. After the battle, Villeneuve was captured. Released shortly after, he returned to France but died within a year. Some say he took his own life, afraid of facing Napoleon's wrath. He wasn't just a bad commander. He was a man who froze at a crucial moment, and his hesitation changed history. Let's head south now, to Mexico. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. In the early 1830s, Santa Anna was Mexico's president. Then he became a dictator. Then he switched sides. Then he switched back again. He made and broke alliances with dizzying speed, depending on what suited him. But the world remembers him most for the Alamo. In 1836, Santa Anna led thousands of troops against a tiny group of Texas rebels holed up in an old Spanish mission. He won, overwhelmingly, but it wasn't a strategic victory. It was a bloody, stubborn, slow siege that allowed Texan leaders time to organize. A month later, at the Battle of San Jacinto, his overconfidence cost him everything. The Texans captured him. He was forced to sign a treaty granting Texas independence. Later, during the Mexican-American War, he was again given command, after promising the U.S. he'd help negotiate peace. Instead, once back in Mexico, he turned on everyone again and led Mexican forces in battle. He lost. Again. From Mexico, we move north again, to one of the most shocking surrenders in U.S. history. William Hull. Hull was a veteran of the Revolutionary War and the governor of the Michigan Territory. When war broke out with Britain, he was asked to defend the region and invade Canada if possible. He had the numbers, he had the resources, but he didn't have the nerve. Hull hesitated, unsure of what the British and their Native American allies were planning. As he waited, British General Isaac Brock and Shawnee leader Tecumseh acted quickly. They launched attacks, captured forts, and cut off Hull's supply lines. At one point, Hull ordered the evacuation of Fort Dearborn, modern-day Chicago. As the soldiers and their families marched out, they were ambushed. Dozens were killed. Then came the final blow. In August 1812, Brock and Tecumseh crossed into American territory and surrounded Detroit. Hull believed he was outnumbered. He wasn't, but panic set in. Without firing a single shot, he surrendered the entire fort, along with 2,000 American troops, artillery, and supplies. The British couldn't believe their luck. It was a gift of a victory. From Rome to World War I, from the jungles of Paraguay to the frozen rivers of Detroit, these men led armies, but their legacies are warnings. Because history doesn't just remember the conquerors, it also remembers the commanders who got it all wrong.